Forget what you've seen on TV detective shows. Today we're cracking a case that's almost 2,000 years old. Our crime scene? The ancient temple in Jerusalem. And our clues? They're buried in just a few lines of text from the Talmud. So let's grab our magnifying glasses and dive right into this amazing legal mystery.
So, picture the temple. This is not just any building, okay? This is a place of incredible sanctity, a place where every single action, every detail, has to be absolutely perfect. The offerings people brought here were part of a sacred system that demanded total precision. One tiny slip-up, one wrong move, and the whole ritual could be worthless. The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
All right, let's open our case file. We're looking at the mincha, the meal offering. Now, on the surface, the procedure seems pretty straightforward. You've got fine flour in a sacred vessel. Then, a priest performs the most critical step. He scoops out a very specific amount, called the kometz, and that handful is what goes on the altar. Simple, precise, and incredibly important.
And here it is. This is our crime. What happens if someone who's not a priest, an outsider, a czar as the text calls them, what if they do that all-important scoop? The whole offering is now compromised. So the question is, can it be saved, or is it ruined for good? Our investigation starts right now.
You know, like any good investigation, we've got to start with our first piece of evidence. This one comes from a major authority, a sage named Rav, and his ruling seems to give us a really clear path forward. Or so it seems.
Rav's statement seems to solve the whole case right away. He says if a non-priest takes the handful, he should just, well, put it back. Then a real priest can do the scoop correctly and everything's fixed. Problem solved, right?
But if you know anything about the Talmud, you know a simple answer is almost always the beginning of a way more complicated question. Rav's seemingly obvious solution is about to open up a huge can of worms, revealing all these profound legal contradictions.
And here is the first major roadblock. We have this higher established law from the Mishnah that flat out says a non-priest disqualifies the offering, period. So how can Rav just say, return it? Is the offering disqualified, or isn't it? These two statements seem to be in a total head-to-head conflict. This is where the real detective work starts. The Talmudic sages now have to figure out how to reconcile these two conflicting clues. They need a theory, right? A theory that lets both the Mishnah's law and Rav's ruling be true at the same time. So the first theory they kick around is based on a debate that was already happening. They think, maybe this is all about a very specific situation. What if, after the scoop, some of the flour was spilled? There's a sage, Beteira, who says you can just refill it from home, but others say nope, it's disqualified. So maybe Rav's ruling only works if the handful is perfectly intact. It's a pretty clever attempt to find a loophole. But this line of thinking hits a brick wall pretty fast. The wording in the original sources just doesn't back it up, so it's a dead end. The investigation is forced to pivot and ask a much, much more fundamental question. To really get why a non-priest scooping some flour is such a massive deal, the sages take what you could call a necessary detour. They realize they need to nail down a precise legal definition for what even counts as a sacrificial rite, an act that only a priest is allowed to perform.
So to define a true sacrificial rite, they basically use a process of elimination. They look at other rituals to see what's what. So what about slaughtering an animal for sacrifice? Well, it turns out a non-priest can do that, so that's not it. Okay, how about the red heifer ceremony? That means a priest, but its purpose is all about purification, not a direct altar sacrifice. And examining leprous marks? Obviously a priestly duty, but it's not a ritual offering. By narrowing it down like this, they isolate what a true rite really is.
And the conclusion of this whole detour is absolutely crucial. The scooping of the handful, the kometz, is officially confirmed to be a true, bona fide sacrificial rite. And that means a non-priest doing it is a genuine Category 1 legal problem. This just confirms our mystery is real, which brings us right back to square one.
Just when it feels like we're totally stuck, a new piece of evidence gets brought into the courtroom. It's an external teaching, a Beteira, and it should clear everything up. But, as you're about to see, it only makes the mystery that much deeper. So this teaching basically says that the sage Beteira, the guy we met a minute ago, would permit returning the handful in all kinds of disqualification cases, not just some minor ones. And it explicitly includes a non-priest performing the scoop. So this idea of just put it back, it seems like it was a pretty well-known opinion the whole time.
And this creates a brilliant new problem. If this ruling was already known, why did Rav, our star witness, even have to say it in the first place? Great legal minds don't waste their breath stating the obvious. His testimony, which was our primary clue, now seems totally redundant. What was he really trying to tell us?
This is it. This is the key. Rav wasn't just repeating something everybody already knew. He was pointing to a distinction so subtle, so nuanced, that it had been completely overlooked. The case is about to be blown wide open. And now, we've arrived at the final verdict. The entire winding investigation has been leading up to this single, elegant solution. Here is Rav's hidden meaning. He was teaching everyone that the ritual isn't a single action, it's actually two distinct actions. First, you have the physical act of taking the handful. But second, there's the legal act of sanctifying that handful by placing it into another sacred vessel before it goes to the altar. So here's the crucial point. The offering is only permanently ruined if the non-priest completes both of those steps. If he just takes the scoop but doesn't then place it in that second sacred vessel, the error is still reversible. He can put it back. That's the hidden gem Rav was pointing to. But hold on. The text presents one final, absolutely brilliant objection. It's like a classic one last thing moment from a detective movie. The solution is to return the handful to the vessel it came from. But that vessel is also a sacred service vessel, so doesn't the very act of returning it trigger the permanent disqualification we're trying to avoid? It feels like we are trapped in a perfect paradox. And here is the masterstroke that solves everything, this time from another sage, Rabbi Yohanan. A sacred vessel's power to make something holy, it's not automatic. It has to be activated by human consciousness. It all, and I mean all, comes down to intent. And there it is, case closed. The handful can be returned without getting disqualified because the person's intent is to undo the ritual, to reverse the mistake, not to sanctify the flower. The vessel's sacred power just stays dormant because the thought required to wake it up simply isn't there. The physical action is meaningless without the right mental component. And so, our detective story, which started with something as simple as a handful of flour, ends with this incredibly profound conclusion about the very nature of sacredness. It leaves us with a huge question to think about. In any ritual, really in any meaningful act we do, how much of its power lies not in the action itself, but in the mind of the one performing it?